Hi, this is Dr. Georgia. I hope you find today's message a blessing in your life. We want to make sure that we continue to provide these video messages for you when you can't come to church, or for those of you who live in a different state, or we noticed recently we have a lot of people in even different countries who are tuning in. So if that is you and you can donate to us, we invite you to hit that donate button just below the message here. So thanks so much. Put your hand over your eyes, if you will, and just open your eyes. I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And now your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
And now just cover your heart and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that we are the author of our experience. We are the author of our experience. Now notice I didn't say that we're the author of the conditions of our lives. Sometimes we can't control the conditions of our lives, but we can always control the experience that we're having of the condition of our lives. So if your office, your company is downsizing and you lose your job, we don't need to be a victim to that. We can't control it, but we don't need to be a victim to it. If our spouse walks out the door and we're totally in shock, we can't control that, but we don't need to be a victim to it. If our adult children have decided that they don't want to be with us anymore, it's sad, we need to grieve it. We can't control it. We don't need to be a victim to it. See, we're the author of our experience, and so often what we think is that positivity and happiness are the same thing. They're not the same thing. Sometimes very positive things happen in our life that will not make us happy. When I realized I needed to stop drinking and sober up and do the hard work of recovery from alcoholism, it did not make me happy. But it was a very positive experience in my life. So here is the thing that we want to be clear about, however. Being the author of our experience doesn't mean to stuff down the stuff that is happening in our life that is painful for us, that makes us sad. There's way too much of that in New Thought churches. Stuffing our feelings down, putting on a perky face, marching on, and saying some happy BS. No, that's not really what we're about here. We're about something much, much deeper than that. But the truth is, there does need to be an end to our anger, to our grief, to our hopelessness. We need to go through that, but there needs to be an end to it. And sometimes we allow that to just linger on too long. You know, I have friends who've been left by somebody years ago, and they're still holding on tremendous bitterness to that experience and to that spouse. They're angry. And not only are they angry at their spouse, but then they're angry at all the people who are in the gender of their spouse. All men are terrible. All women are awful. We have to let go of that. You know what happens when we're bitter? And this is true. It just robs us of our joy. It robs us of our grace. It robs us of our ability to touch the divinity that is absolutely within each and every one of us. And you know, when you bite into something that's bitter and your face gets all, your lips up, that's what's happening to our heart. That's what happens to our heart when we let it go too long in our life. Well, we're in the final part of a 4-part series of a little book that I came across called The Art of Possibility, Transforming Professional and Personal Life. It's written by Rosamund Zander and Benjamin Zander, a couple. She's a therapist. He's a conductor of the Boston Philharmonic and a teacher of music in the New England Conservatory of Music. And they decided that they would tackle this idea of helping us step into an unlimited life. You know, we say that all the time. Life is unlimited. But we continue to live a limited life. I do that, you do that, everybody does that. because we have these blinders on and we think we can only go this far. Well, this book has 12 simple, not easy, but simple spiritual practices. You know, like I say, spiritual practice is not limited to prayer and meditation. There are millions and millions of practices that we can engage in to help us increase our ability to grasp on to everything that God has for us here on this planet. Well, these 12 spiritual practices, remember, the first one was everything is invented. Everything in our life, we've invented it. And the good news about that is whatever we don't like that we've invented, we can reinvent in our life. The second one is being aware that we're in a land, as Deepak Chopra says, the land of pure potentiality, the land where anything is possible, being aware of it, not just knowing about it, but knowing it in our life. When we step out in the morning, that there's a potential here, there's possibility here for us, and to begin looking for it. The third one is give everybody an A. Everybody gets an A. You get an A, you get an A, you get an A. Everybody you meet gets an A when you meet them. That's the first thing. And they can slide down. A few people slide down. B, C, D. Oh, you're an F right now. But when we meet them, everybody starts out with an A in our life. The fourth one is being a contribution. And everybody can be a contribution. And when we are a contribution, we open up possibilities in our life because we change our vibration. When you are a person of increase, and I'm not talking about doing big things. I'm talking about just smiling or putting a hand on the shoulder or arm of someone who you walk down the street, you see they're sad, or you're in a class with them here and you see they're sad, and you just give them a hug. That's a person of contribution. When I lived in Santa Rosa, I developed this practice that I actually did for years. Of every Saturday, I would go to the grocery store and I would buy a bunch of daisies. And after church on Sunday, I would take those daisies to a nursing home. And it didn't matter which nursing home. I moved around, I changed them up, I did it, and I just walk in the door. It took me 10 minutes. I'd walk in the door, and the first person I saw in a wheelchair in the hallway who was looking lonely and sad, I'd just walk up and give them the daisies and say, I hope you have a good day today. A person being a person of contribution. The next one is leading from any chair. And that just means giving empowerment to the people who you're leading. Leading from behind, as Jesus would say. Leading, being the servant leader. And the sixth one is rule number 6. And rule number 6 is simply don't take yourself so seriously. Don't take yourself so seriously. Lighten up. Number 7 was being present with the way things are. Not where you want them to be, not where they should be, where they are right now. Being present with that. Saying, okay, I don't like this. I'm being present with it right now and see where the possibility lies within it. And the 8th one is giving way to our passion. All of us have passion. Just giving way to that passion. And the next one was lighting the spark. Lighting other people's spark. Encouraging them, rooting for them, as the affirmation card says today. Rooting for everybody. God's rooting for you. You root for everybody else. Well, we're going to jump right in today to the 10th one. And the 10th one, this is the 10th, 11th, and 12th. By the way, they call this the graduate study in learning how to be in a land of possibility, because these are tougher. And I have to say, when I read them and when I began to think about them, they're really hard to do. They're not as easy as the first 9 to do. This one is called Being the Board. Now, they use the illustration of life as a game a lot in this book. So they're talking about a board game. And everything that goes on in your life goes on your board, because you are the board. So everything that happens in the game of life called you happens on your board. So when things feel like they're off and it doesn't seem like there's any possibility for improvement in your life, when you're angry and blocked but despite all of your efforts, everybody else is angry and blocked and nobody's cooperating, nobody's helping anybody else, that's the time when we can look and see this rule number 10, being the board. And it's like moving the problem, any problem in your life, from the world outside to the inside landscape, so that it's on your, within your boundaries, So the illustration they use here is, imagine a car is stopped at a red light, and a drunk driver comes up and bangs into your car. Now, immediately we go to, the drunk driver is wrong, the drunk driver is at blame, and certainly a case could be made for that civilly. But remember, we're not dealing in civil action here. We're dealing in the idea that we don't want blame. Blame doesn't matter. We're not in civil action. We're in spiritual action. So we say to ourselves, what part did I play? How did I get this drunk driver on my board? How did he get here? Well, you know what? I got in the car. And I went out on the road. And it's risky to be out on the road. There are drunk drivers everywhere, people asleep everywhere, people who are too angry to be behind the wheel everywhere. Every time I get in a car, I take a risk. Now, this isn't to make us wrong or bad or blame us for getting hit by a drunk driver. It's not about that. It's about taking responsibility for the experience of our lives. It's not about shame and blame. It's about taking responsibility. So you have to ask yourself, well, I want to enjoy life. I don't want to stay at home because I'm afraid to get out and get in a car. I want to be out. I want to drive. We just have to know that when we drive, we're taking a risk. We're putting everybody around us on our game board in our life. And it's risky business. So there are two questions they invite us to ask to keep everybody on our board. And the first one is really not a question, it's a declaration. And the declaration is, I am the framework for all that happens in my life. I'm the framework. I'm not the cause. I'm the framework for everything that happens in my life. And as a result of that, we can do that with our adult children, with our young children. We can do it with our grandchildren. We can do it with our romantic relationships. We can do it with our jobs. We can do it everywhere. How did I get these people on my board? And is there any possibility? The second question is, if I want to do anything about it, and if it's possible, where does the possibility lie in this situation? Where is there a possibility here for me? And if we can ask those two questions, we can begin to work with this number 10, being the board. Now remember, it's not about right and wrong, because there are some things that happen to you and to happen to me that are just plain wrong. Shouldn't have happened. Bad. But if we can leave that over there and look at the possibility, I promise you, you will find possibility in every one of those situations for you. The second one we're going to look at today is number 11. It's called Creating Framework for Possibility. If we look at every area of our life, especially the ones that we don't like, and ask this simple question: in this event, was I pushed by fear or pulled by a vision? Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith asks us to ask that all the time. Am I being pushed by fear, or am I being pulled by a vision? And if we can begin to train ourselves to stop being as fearful and being more able to be in the state of possibility, life will go better for us. The authors suggest that we become very proficient in escaping fear. And we put a lot of energy into escaping fear in our life, which simply compounds the problem. I used to escape in fear in alcohol. I don't do that anymore, but I found food works quite well for me. You know? And so I can escape into food. I can escape into Law and Order shows. I can escape into a lot of things, but my problems haven't done anything. And if we can begin to teach ourselves to not escape, but to begin to look into what possibility there is. They do a story to illustrate the idea that possibility is everywhere. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It's just, if we are open to possibility, it's everywhere. So they talk about a little girl who has leukemia. Now she's in remission, she's doing quite well, and it's time for her to go back to school. But she hasn't, her hair hasn't grown back in from the chemotherapy. But her mother is a working mother. If you've ever been a working mother, you know that if your child can go to school, you need them to go to school. And so she needed her to go to school. And she went to school and she bought her a brand new headscarf to put on her bald head, and she sent her off to school. She got to school, and of course the kids, being kids, snatched the scarf off and started to make fun of her bald head. And she went home and she said, "Mom, I don't ever want to go back to school. Please don't make me go back to school until my hair grows back in." Mom says, "You gotta go back to school." Next day, she goes back to school. Kids snatch the scarf off. Same thing happens. She goes home. She begs her mother, "Please don't make me go back to school. You gotta go back to school." Well, the third day, she walks in, she sits down, the teacher comes in. The teacher is well loved by all these kids. Teacher takes off her coat and greets the kids lovingly, and then she pulls the scarf off her head, and she's bald. She'd shaved all her hair. That's a possibility that changed that child's life. Now, the great thing is, this teacher was so well loved that the kids all then went home and said, "Mom, can I shave my head?" And some of the moms let them do it. And so they had a whole new fashion statement at the school. Why? Because one teacher was open to the possibility of one action. You and I can train ourselves to do that. You know, many companies are moving now from mission statement to vision statements, because mission statements kind of state that they're very grounded in competition. Vision statements are not so grounded in competition. HP used to have Hewlett-Packard used to have a vision statement that said, "We are the very best industrial lab in the world." And they went to a workshop by this couple, and they changed their vision statement with one word, and the word was this. Instead of saying, "We are the very best industrial lab in the world," they now say, "We are the very best industrial lab for the world." Do you see that one tweak? That one tweak in their vision changed it from competition to contribution in their lives. We can do that with our lives. Whenever we're in an issue, we can say, "Oh, is there a possibility I could make a small tweak here?" And what would that tweak be? And again, I promise you, if you'll sit down and just ask the divine, whether you want to call it God, or Allah, or Elohim, or sacred wisdom, or divine intelligence, it doesn't matter. If you will sit down and ask, what tweak can I make here to make a difference in what's going on in my life? And shut up. Don't talk. Don't try and give God ideas. God doesn't need your ideas. Just quiet. I promise you something will come. If you're struggling in hearing it, I invite you to remember that we are in spiritual community. We're not just a Sunday church. Call a practitioner and say, "Look, I'm having trouble. I need to see where the possibility in this mess is." Now, they're not magic. They're not magicians. They will work with you. And together, you will find that piece of possibility. And if you're just too scared to call a practitioner, call somebody you know in the church. Just work it out together. Maybe if you're in the choir, you call a choir member. Maybe if you're in a class, you call a classmate. Whatever, a small group, or you're on a hike. Say, "I'm having this mess. Do you see any possibility for me in this mess?" And my guess is you'll find it together. So let's move on to the last one. The 12th one is called the we story. The we story. Developing a we story in your life. The easiest way for me to talk to you about the we story is to tell you a story of Ben Zander's father, who, I'm going to just take a little trick. I'm over a cold and I don't want to start a hacking fit right now. The we story goes like this. And Ben Zander's father is a specialist in conflict resolution. He's especially a specialist in conflict resolution that deals with Arabs and Jews. Thank you, Justin. Now I'm going to tell you, once this starts, sometimes it doesn't stop you. I had that experience where you just think you're going to hack your lung out. So if that happens, I'm going to move on, and I'll tell you number 12 another time. All right, let's try this again. We're going to go to 12 really quick so I can get through this. Number 12 is the we story, and the best way, as I say, to tell the we story is to tell the story of Walter Zander, Ben's dad, who he invites to talk to his class about his work working with conflict resolution between Arabs and Jews. And that's a very contentious situation, much like what we're experiencing in this country today between the white supremacists and the other people. So what he did when he came to the class, he began to tell the story of the Jews. And he started out with making them understand that their leader was Abraham. Then he went on to talk about many Bible stories, and medieval life, the contributions that Jews made to the sciences, and to the arts, and to literature, and the diaspora, and the Holocaust. And he rested his story on a tiny sliver of land called Palestine in 1947. With as much passion as he told the story of the Jews, he then went on to tell the story of the Arabs to the students. And he started out saying, our father too was Abraham. And then he went on to tell of the many contributions in sciences and math and literature and the arts. And he talked about the beautiful library in Alexandria. And above all, he talked about the legendary courtesy of the Arabs. And he did it with equal passion. He found oneness within these two warring tribes. And he did that by respect. That's what we can do when we develop a we story. Do you know, I am in love with a guy named Van Jones. He's a fabulous, makes a fabulous, if you haven't Googled him and don't know who Van Jones is, he's a tireless worker in dealing with white supremacy, and dealing with immigration injustice, and dealing with police violence. He speaks strongly on all of those issues. And as strongly as he speaks on those issues, he purposely goes and finds people who don't agree with him. He purposely goes and finds people and he says, what makes you hurt? Who are you? What is your life like? How could your life be made better? And he finds the we story. He finds the story of commonality in each of those organizations. We can do that in our life with our families. We can do that. We can find the we story. We can stop categorizing people and actually looking at them with the eyes of namaste, looking at them with the eyes of love, and saying, what makes you hurt? What could make your life better? And begin to find a we story in our life. CSA is very good at finding we stories. We do that a lot purposely, and people just do it because we bring people. We've been lucky, fortunate, to create an atmosphere in which we attract people of all different walks of life and ethnicities, we can do better. We're doing pretty good. This Wednesday night, we have an opportunity that I think will help us all have a bigger we story with transgender people. Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, we're going to have a panel here. And this panel will be a diverse group of transgender people who will be able to understand more about how they live in this life. What life is like for transgender people authentically. And I think that's important for us to be able to do. So come Wednesday night so that we can develop, and you know, like I said last week, I've been a lesbian a long time. There's lots I don't know about transgender life. I'm going to try and get it videotaped also, but I want as many people here as possible to be here. Bring all your questions. And I said to them, they asked if they could come and do this panel. It's Transgender Awareness Week, month. Is it month? Transgender Awareness Month. They asked if they could do this panel. I said, there's only one thing I want to make sure that you understand. That there can be no stupid question that comes from the audience. So bring all of your, they said, look, we do this all over. There's not a question your congregation could come up with that we haven't heard. Bring people from your offices, bring your book clubs, bring everybody you can think of to come. Unfortunately, I have to be in Albuquerque at a meeting for our denomination, but Reverend Rick will be here to host, and it's going to be awesome. So I hope we fill this place up. Yeah. So let's take this message into prayer, and I do appreciate your patience with me. So we just know that there's only one light. There's only one light. It's the light of love. And I allow it to guide me, that light that guides me to people I know and people I don't know, and to embrace them with the same amount of love. People I like and people I'm not so crazy about, same amount of love. People I understand and people I don't know what makes them tick, same amount of love. Because all that other stuff will get figured out later. For the guiding light, the light of the one that I call God, moves me forward in peace and abundance. I give thanks. I release this word into the law together we say. And so it is.